right, so today we're diving into, well, it's a tough one, this escalating conflict in the Middle East, specifically those recent airstrikes in Beirut. We've got a lot to unpack, obviously. Israel, Hezbollah, it's all tangled up.
It's a lot more than just those two, right? It's like almost like someone just took a match right to a powder keg, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Decades, we're talking decades of tension just bubbling under the surface. And Israel and Hezbollah, it's just the tip of the iceberg. You start getting into regional powers, these proxy conflicts, and then, well, the big one, a wider war. It's all there.
Right. And our listeners sent in some reports just focusing on these airstrikes for a second. At least 22 people killed, dozens wounded, and the picture's just devastating. Whole apartment buildings just gone. What makes this time different?
Yeah, no, those numbers they're awful.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we're seeing is it's different because it's just more intense, and the location hitting deeper into Beirut.
Mm-hmm.
Those southern suburbs, and I mean, you probably know this, but that's Hezbollah's home turf.
So, I mean, is this a show of force then from Israel?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely see it that way. And you got to remember, Israel is dealing with, I mean, it's two fronts. Hamas down south, Hezbollah up north. It's like a pincer, right? Mm-hmm. They're caught. So these airstrikes, it's got to be a way to try and look strong, take back control of how this whole thing looks, you know?
Which is, I mean, that's a terrifying thought. If this is them trying to take control, what happens if it, spirals? And speaking of which, we also got these reports. Same day as the Beirut strikes, Israeli forces firing on UN peacekeepers down in southern Lebanon. 2 peacekeepers injured. What's the significance of that?
That's not good. It's like a huge warning sign.
Yeah.
Right. It shows you just how much of a tinderbox it is over there. And it tells you that this isn't just Israel and Hezbollah anymore, right? We've got international groups involved, peacekeeping forces, and then it becomes this potential to just drag in more and more players. And then you go from a regional conflict to, well, something much, much bigger.
Okay, so we've got Israel caught between Hamas and Hezbollah. The UN's getting dragged in. I mean, who isn't involved at this point?
Well, and that's where it gets even more interesting, right? You remember about a week before all this, that massive missile strike on Israel.
Right.
That was, if you believe what you hear, that was Iran. So now you add that whole other layer onto this, and, well, it gets complicated fast.
So hold on. We're saying this is a proxy conflict then, basically. Like, Iran and Israel are using other groups to fight each other?
Exactly. That's exactly what's so dangerous about all this. It's like, imagine a chess game, right? But the stakes are incredibly high. Mm-hmm. And any wrong move, any escalation, it could be catastrophic. And not just for the region, for the world.
This is, I mean, it sounds like one of those geopolitical thrillers, you know?
Right.
But this is real life,
right,
with real people stuck right in the middle of it.
And we haven't even gotten to the human cost yet. But real quick, before we do, there's one more piece to this whole thing we got to talk about. The United States, they're stuck right in the middle of all this too, aren't they?
Right. And it's not just being there, right? We've got those reports, that phone call, Netanyahu and President Biden. It sounds like they really don't see eye to eye on how Israel wants to, well, retaliate against Iran.
It's definitely, there's some tension there now between the U.S. and Israel, and that's not a good sign. Biden, the administration, they're saying restraint, calling for Israel to be proportionate in their response.
Yeah.
But that makes you wonder.
Proportionate? What does that even mean in this situation? Like you said, it's a powder keg. Yeah. Everyone's on edge, and there are so many different groups with their own goals, you know?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question here, isn't it? How do you even, what is proportionate when you're talking about, well, everything we just mentioned, proxy wars, and then, always that nuclear threat in the background? And you can't forget, it's people's lives, real people. Caught in the middle.
Right. It's got to be a nightmare scenario for the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Trying to support an ally, but also, like, how do you stop a war? What are they most worried about specifically from these reports we have?
Well, from what I'm seeing, it seems like the big fear, the one that's really got their attention, is that Israel might go after Iran directly, mm-hmm, hitting their nuclear facilities, maybe even oil. And I get it. Israel, they want to respond. They see a threat. But that, talk about gasoline on a fire, right? Yeah. That could be a huge mistake.
Right, and then we're not talking about a regional conflict anymore. And on top of that, didn't we also see there's some tension about intelligence sharing, right, between the U.S. and Israel? Like maybe the U.S. feels like they're not getting the full picture of what Israel's really planning to do.
Yeah, there's definitely been some, let's say, friction there. The U.S., they need to work closely with Israel in the Middle East. So if that breaks down, if there's any sort of distrust, it makes it almost impossible to work together,
Right.
coordinate a response, or even just talk things through.
It's like, you think about these alliances, you think they're strong, but then something like this happens and suddenly, and speaking of high stakes, I mean, we can't forget about the people, on the ground, these reports. It's heartbreaking, all the stories of people who've lost everything.
Yeah, it's easy to get, caught up in the strategy of it all, the military stuff, the politics. But this human cost, it's just awful. Over 1.2 million people displaced in Lebanon just since this latest thing started. 1.2 million. Just try to imagine that for a second. Leaving your home, everything you know.
Yeah.
You might never get to go back.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that many people. And then, where do they even go? You've got families fleeing Lebanon, trying to get to Syria, which is, that's saying something.
Yeah, no, it's a desperate situation. And the thing is, it's not just a number, 1.2 million. That's 1.2 million individual people, families, lives, all because of this.
And those are just the ones who got out. The Lebanese Health Ministry, they're reporting almost 1,400 casualties. Plus, on the Israeli side, you've got, something like 70,000 people who've had to leave their homes up north.
You feel overwhelmed almost, that much suffering. It feels like every time you turn around, there's another attack, another report about someone dying. When does it end?
That's the question, isn't it? Where do you even start with something like this? How do we even try to understand it and what it's doing to people?
I think honestly, you have to start by just admitting how complicated it is. There's no easy answers here. It's not good guys and bad guys, It goes back so far. History, religion, politics, it's all one big mess.
That's a lot to take in, that's for sure. But we really went deep on this one, right? Starting with these awful airstrikes and then, the whole picture, the whole Middle East, really. So, if someone's listening to this and they're only going to remember one thing, just one, what would you say? What's the most important thing to remember?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. Yeah. But I think, honestly, the biggest takeaway here, it's that there's no easy answers with this conflict. You're talking about, it goes back so far, decades, centuries even. All these histories, and then you add in religion, and then who wants what politically. It's not a simple thing.
No, it's not. And I think that's so important to remember, because it's easy to look at a headline, and think it's all straightforward. But we gotta look deeper than that.
Yeah, for sure. And especially now, right? Everything's so tense. It's easy to just react emotionally. But we gotta be smart about this. Question things. Try and see it from the other side. Even if we want peace, that's how you get there, by understanding, not by judging,
and by remembering the people. Right.
Yeah.
At the center of it all of the families that have had to leave their homes, the people who've lost their lives.
Exactly. It's easy to forget sometimes.
Yeah.
But behind all of it, the headlines, the speeches, the fighting, they're real people whose lives are being shattered.
Yeah. That's the truth. And on that note, to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. This one was, it was heavy, but hopefully it gave you something to think about, and maybe even inspired you to keep learning, keep trying to understand the world, because the more we understand, the better chance we have of actually fixing things, and maybe making the world a little bit better.